On March 14, 2016, a young Egyptian man named Ahmed Hassan sat in a cramped internet cafe in the Mbaba district of Cairo, his hands trembling as he typed a message into a Tor browser. The 23-year-old construction worker had been unemployed for 8 months, watching his family sink deeper into debt as his mother's medical bills mounted. In his desperation, he had stumbled upon a hidden forum on the dark web, a place where human organs were advertised like used electronics on a conventional marketplace. The listing he was responding to promised $5,000 for a kidney, more money than Ahmed could earn in 2 years of legitimate work. He had no way of knowing that his decision to click send on that message would pull back the curtain on one of the most sophisticated and disturbing criminal networks operating in the digital shadows. A network that spanned 3 continents and had already destroyed dozens of lives. The organ trade has existed for decades, thriving in the gray zones of medical ethics and international law. But the emergence of the dark web fundamentally transformed this criminal enterprise. Between 2014 and 2017, law enforcement agencies across multiple countries began noticing disturbing patterns in their investigations of human trafficking in illegal medical procedures. What they discovered was a constellation of interconnected networks using encrypted communication channels, cryptocurrency payments, and sophisticated logistics to match organ sellers with desperate patients willing to pay extraordinary sums for a chance at survival. Unlike the crude organ trafficking operations of the past, which relied on physical intermediaries and left obvious paper trails, these new darknet marketplaces operated with the efficiency and anonymity of any other e-commerce platform, except their inventory consisted of human body parts. The first major breakthrough in understanding the scope of this trade came from an unlikely source. Dr. Rajesh Patel, a nephrologist working at a private hospital in Mumbai, had been troubled by an increasing number of patients arriving at his clinic with poorly executed kidney transplants and severe post-operative complications. Throughout late 2015 and early 2016, Dr. Patel documented 7 cases of patients who had received transplants outside India's legal framework, returning home with infections, rejection episodes, and, in 2 cases, organs that appeared to have been removed and preserved under substandard conditions. What disturbed Dr. Patel most was that these patients, all from middle-class backgrounds, claimed to have arranged their transplants through online platforms, paying between $80,000 and $150,000 for complete packages that included surgery, accommodation, and post-operative care. When questioned about the donors, the patients offered only vague descriptions and showed receipts bearing the names of shell companies registered in multiple jurisdictions. Dr. Patel compiled his findings into a detailed report and submitted it to the Indian Council of Medical Research on April 22, 2016. His report, titled "Evidence of Coordinated Illegal Transplant Tourism Facilitated Through Digital Platforms," outlined what he believed to be a systematic operation. The consistency of the patient's stories, the similar price points, and the standardized medical documentation all suggest a centralized organizing body, Dr. Patel wrote. However, the complete absence of direct physical contact between patients and organizers, with all arrangements made through encrypted digital channels, represents a new evolution in transplant-related crime. The report included photocopied receipts showing cryptocurrency wallet addresses, screenshots of encrypted messaging apps, and medical records demonstrating the questionable quality of the surgical procedures. Dr. Patel estimated that based on the cases he had personally encountered, there could be hundreds or even thousands of similar operations occurring across India and neighboring countries. The Indian authorities initially approached Dr. Patel's report with skepticism. The concept of organ trafficking was not new. India had struggled with illegal kidney trades for decades, particularly in the impoverished villages of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, where economic desperation drove people to sell their organs. What was different about Dr. Patel's claims was the sophistication of the operation and the involvement of what appeared to be international criminal networks operating primarily in cyberspace. The Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, which had jurisdiction over international financial crimes, assigned a small team to investigate the cryptocurrency transactions mentioned in the report. Meanwhile, The Central Bureau of Investigation's Cybercrime Division began monitoring dark web marketplaces for any listings related to human organs. What the investigators found stunned them. By late May 2016, cybercrime analysts had identified at least 12 active darknet marketplaces that featured sections dedicated to medical tourism or biological materials. These platforms operated on the Tor network, accessible only through specialized browsers that anonymized users' locations and identities. The marketplaces mimicked the interface of legitimate e-commerce sites like Amazon or eBay, complete with user reviews, seller ratings, and customer service features. One marketplace, operating under the name Life Surplus, featured over 40 active listings for kidneys, with prices ranging from $80,000 to $200,000 depending on the donor's age, health status, and blood type. The platform even offered a matching service that claimed to use medical algorithms to ensure compatibility between donors and recipients, with testimonials from satisfied customers praising the professional and discreet service. The investigation revealed that these marketplaces functioned as intermediaries, connecting three distinct parties: desperate sellers, usually from economically disadvantaged backgrounds in developing countries; wealthy buyers, often from Gulf states, Western Europe, or affluent Asian families; and corrupt medical professionals willing to perform illegal transplants. The platforms took commissions ranging from 15% to 30% of each transaction, with payments processed exclusively through cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Monero to avoid traditional banking oversight. The sellers typically received only a fraction of what buyers paid. In many cases, donors who were promised $5,000 to $10,000 for their kidneys, while the organs were resold to recipients for 10 to 20 times that amount. Inspector Vikram Singh of the CBI's Cybercrime Unit described the operation's sophistication in a confidential briefing delivered on June 15, 2016. These are not amateur criminals operating from basements. The technical infrastructure requires significant expertise: secure servers, encrypted communications, cryptocurrency tumbling services to obscure payment trails, and coordination with corrupt officials at multiple levels. The marketplaces employ customer service representatives who communicate in multiple languages, medical consultants who vet potential donors and recipients, and logistics coordinators who arrange international travel, documentation, and surgical facilities. This is organized crime adapted perfectly for the digital age. As the Indian investigation expanded, similar patterns were emerging in Egypt. The Egyptian Ministry of Health had been conducting its own inquiry into a surge of young men from poor neighborhoods in Cairo and Alexandria showing up at emergency rooms with post-surgical complications consistent with organ removal. Dr. Fatima Al-Masri, who headed the ministry's Medical Ethics Committee, had been tracking these cases since early 2015, but the acceleration in 2016 was alarming. In a press conference held on July 8, 2016, Dr. Al-Masri revealed that Egyptian hospitals had treated 127 cases of suspicious post-operative complications related to kidney removal in just the first 6 months of 2016, compared to 89 cases for the entire previous year. We are witnessing an epidemic of illegal organ removal, Dr. Al-Masri stated, her voice tight with frustration. Young men, often unemployed or underemployed, are being preyed upon by criminal networks that promise them life-changing sums of money. What they receive instead is a fraction of what they were promised: inadequate medical care and permanent damage to their health. Egyptian police had arrested several local recruiters who worked for the networks, identifying potential donors in poor neighborhoods and directing them to the Darknet platforms. One such recruiter, Mohammed Nabil, was detained on June 23, 2016, in the Cairo suburb of Shubra. During interrogation, Nabil revealed details about the operation structure that aligned disturbingly well with what Indian investigators were uncovering. According to police reports filed with the Cairo Criminal Court, Nabil admitted to recruiting approximately 30 young men over an 18-month period, earning a commission of $500 for each person he successfully directed to the platform. I would find men who were desperate, drowning in debt, or unable to support their families, Nabil told investigators according to court transcripts. I would tell them about an opportunity to make money by donating a kidney, that it was safe and legal, and that many people had done it before. I gave them instructions for accessing the website through Tor and helped them create accounts. After that, everything was handled online. I never knew where they went or what happened to them after the surgery. The information from Nabil and other low-level operatives helped investigators map the network's operational structure. Potential donors would be vetted through the Darknet platform, submitting medical information, photographs, and detailed questionnaires about their health history. Those who passed the initial screening would be required to undergo blood tests at specific laboratories, often legitimate medical facilities, whose staff had no knowledge their services were being used for illegal purposes. The results would be uploaded to the platform, where they would be matched with potential recipients. Once a match was confirmed, the donor would receive detailed travel instructions, usually directing them to surgical facilities in countries with weak regulatory oversight or high levels of corruption. Turkey, Pakistan, and several Central Asian republics emerged as common destinations. Some operations occurred in private clinics within Egypt and India itself, facilities that had been infiltrated or established specifically for illegal transplants. The Turkish National Police had been monitoring suspicious activity at several private hospitals in Istanbul and Antalya since mid-2015. A confidential intelligence report dated August 3, 2016, obtained by International Law Enforcement Cooperation, indicated that Turkish authorities had identified at least 8 private medical facilities suspected of performing illegal transplants. The report noted that these facilities maintained legitimate medical practices as cover, performing standard procedures alongside their illegal operations. Patients would be admitted under false pretenses, listed as receiving treatment for other conditions, while the actual transplant surgeries took place in operating rooms that were kept off the official schedule. The Turkish report estimated that between January 2015 and July 2016, approximately 200 illegal kidney transplants had been performed in Istanbul alone, with organs sourced primarily from donors in Egypt, Pakistan, and former Soviet republics. What made the investigation particularly challenging was the international nature of the crime. Donors from Egypt would be matched with recipients from Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, with surgeries performed in Turkey or Pakistan, coordinated through servers located in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, and payments processed through cryptocurrency exchanges registered in jurisdictions with minimal financial oversight. Each component of the operation crossed multiple legal boundaries, requiring cooperation between law enforcement agencies that often had limited capacity for international coordination and faced significant linguistic and legal barriers. By September 2016, investigative journalists had begun to take interest in the story. Reporters from several international media organizations, working independently, started documenting cases and attempting to penetrate the darknet marketplaces. Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist with The Guardian, published a groundbreaking report on September 19, 2016, titled "The Dark Web's Organ Bazaar: How Cryptocurrency Enables a Global Black Market in Human Body Parts." Chen's investigation, which took 6 months and involved interviews with donors, recipients, medical professionals, and law enforcement officials across 4 countries, provided the first comprehensive public documentation of the darknet organ trade networks. Her report included screenshots from multiple marketplaces showing the clinical efficiency with which human organs were advertised and sold. The marketplaces present themselves as providing a service, Chen wrote. They claim to be connecting willing sellers with desperate patients who might otherwise die waiting for organs through legal channels. The platforms feature elaborate justifications, arguing that they're operating in a moral gray zone, facilitating transactions between consenting adults. But this narrative collapses under scrutiny. The sellers are not willing in any meaningful sense. They're economically coerced, often misled about the risks and compensation, and frequently subjected to substandard medical care that leaves them with lifelong health problems. The buyers, meanwhile, are jumping ahead of patients who are wading through legitimate channels, perpetuating a system that literally values life based on wealth. Chen's report included a heartbreaking interview with Youssef Ibrahim, a 26-year-old Egyptian man from Alexandria who had sold his kidney through a darknet platform in early 2016. Ibrahim described how he had been promised $8,000, money he desperately needed to pay for his father's cancer treatment. They told me the surgery would be safe, that I would recover in a few weeks and could return to my normal life, Ibrahim recounted. They sent me to Turkey in March. The surgery was done in what looked like a real hospital, but afterward, the care was terrible. I developed an infection, and when I tried to contact the people who arranged everything, they had disappeared. I received only $3,000, less than half of what was promised. Now I have constant pain. I cannot do heavy labor anymore, and my father died. Anyway, because the money wasn't enough for his treatment. The Guardian's investigation sparked international media attention, with major newspapers and television networks across Europe, North America, and the Middle East picking up the story. On September 25, 2016, Egypt's Al Ahram newspaper published a follow-up investigation titled "The Trade in Body Parts: Egypt's Youth Exploited by International Criminal Networks." The report, based on interviews with Egyptian police officials and medical professionals, claimed that the scale of the problem had been vastly underestimated. According to Al Ahram's sources within the Ministry of Health, the actual number of Egyptians who had sold organs through these networks could be over 500, with most cases going unreported because victims feared legal consequences or were ashamed of their participation. The mounting media attention and pressure from medical ethics organizations pushed governments to take more aggressive action. On October 12, 2016, representatives from the Health and Interior Ministries of India, Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, and several Gulf states met in Dubai for an emergency coordination conference organized by Interpol. The meeting, titled International Cooperation to Combat Illegal Organ Trafficking Networks, brought together law enforcement officials, prosecutors, medical regulators, and cybercrime experts to share intelligence and develop coordinated enforcement strategies. A press release issued after the conference announced the formation of a joint task force dedicated to identifying, investigating, and dismantling international organ trafficking networks operating through digital platforms and cryptocurrency-based payment systems. Despite the international coordination efforts, actually disrupting the networks proved extraordinarily difficult. The technical sophistication of the Darknet marketplaces made them resilient against takedown attempts. When authorities managed to shut down one platform, others quickly emerged to fill the void, often with enhanced security features and more careful operational protocols. The use of cryptocurrency, particularly privacy-focused coins like Monero and Cash, made tracking financial flows nearly impossible without cooperation from the exchanges, and many exchanges operated in jurisdictions beyond the reach of law enforcement. Moreover, the marketplace operators demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of operational security, using multiple layers of encryption, frequently changing server locations, and compartmentalizing their operations so that individual members knew only their specific roles. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. In late November 2016, a cybersecurity researcher operating under the pseudonym Netrunner, who specialized in infiltrating dark web marketplaces for research purposes, managed to identify a vulnerability in one of the largest organ trafficking platforms known as Bioharvest. The researcher had been monitoring the site for months as part of a broader project documenting illegal darknet markets, and noticed patterns in the platform's server responses that suggested a poorly implemented security protocol. Working with a team of ethical hackers, Netrunner exploited this vulnerability on November 28, 2016, gaining access to the marketplace's backend databases. What they found was staggering. Complete records of over 300 transactions spanning nearly 3 years, including donor and recipient information, medical records, payment details, and communications between the platform's operators and their network of recruiters, corrupt medical professionals, and logistics coordinators. Netrunner faced an ethical dilemma. Possessing this information was potentially illegal, and turning it over to authorities might expose the researcher to prosecution. However, after consulting with legal experts and civil liberties organizations, Netrunner decided to provide the data to law enforcement through an intermediary, a journalist at Der Spiegel who had been investigating cybercrime. On December 7, 2016, Der Spiegel published a bombshell report titled, "Inside Bioharvest, a data leak exposes the inner workings of a dark web organ trafficking empire," which detailed findings from the leaked database while protecting Netrunner's identity. The publication simultaneously provided law enforcement agencies in multiple countries with copies of the data, triggering what would become the largest coordinated operation against organ trafficking networks in history. The leaked Bioharvest database revealed the operation's stunning scope and profitability. According to the data, the platform had facilitated 284 organ transactions between January 2014 and November 2016, with a total transaction value exceeding $47 million. The platform itself had collected over $9 million in commissions during this period. The database contained detailed information about donors from 17 countries, with the largest numbers coming from Egypt, 118 cases, Pakistan, 67 cases, and India, 43 cases. Recipients came primarily from Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar, followed by wealthy patients from Iran, China, and several European countries. The data also revealed a disturbing pattern of repeat customers, individuals who had purchased multiple organs over time, suggesting they were either brokers reselling to other parties or patients with chronic conditions requiring multiple transplants. Most damning were the internal communications between the platform's operators, which revealed a complete absence of ethical concern for the people caught up in their network. Messages showed administrators discussing how to minimize payments to donors, how to avoid detection by law enforcement, and how to handle complications when surgeries went wrong. In one exchange dated July 2015, an administrator writing under the username MedCord discussed a donor who had developed severe complications after surgery. Subject is making noise about medical bills and threatening exposure. Recommend standard protocol, minimal settlement, non-disclosure enforcement, monitor for 6 months, then disengage. Cost benefit suggests settlement under $2K, acceptable to resolve issue. The clinical language and casual indifference to human suffering that permeated these communications painted a portrait of individuals who viewed organ trafficking purely as a business optimization problem. The Bioharvest leak provided investigators with the breakthrough they needed. Over the following months, law enforcement agencies used the leaked data to identify and locate operators, recruiters, medical professionals, and logistics coordinators involved in the network. The investigation revealed that Bioharvest was operated by a core group of 7 individuals spread across 4 countries, with the primary administrator, a 34-year-old Ukrainian software engineer named Dmitry Volkov, coordinating operations from Kiev. Volkov had previously worked in legitimate e-commerce, but had pivoted to darknet marketplaces around 2012, initially dealing in stolen credit card information and hacking tools before recognizing the extraordinary profit potential in organ trafficking. On February 15, 2017, Ukrainian cybercrime police, working with Interpol and the FBI's cybercrime unit, raided Volkov's apartment in a residential neighborhood of Kyiv. The raid, conducted at 6:47 a.m. local time, caught Volkov completely off guard. According to the official police report, investigators seized 7 computers, multiple encrypted hard drives, substantial documentation related to Bioharvest's operations, and approximately $340,000 in cash stored in a safe. Volkov was arrested without incident and charged with multiple counts, including organized crime activity, human trafficking, money laundering, and operating illegal medical services. Ukrainian authorities announced the arrest in a press conference the same day, with Colonel Alexei Petrov of the Ukrainian Cyber Police describing it as a significant victory in the fight against one of the most reprehensible forms of cybercrime, the exploitation of human desperation and suffering for profit. The arrest of Volkov triggered a cascade of coordinated enforcement actions across multiple countries. Over the following 3 weeks, authorities in Egypt arrested 11 individuals connected to the network, including 5 recruiters who had directed donors to the platform and 4 medical professionals accused of performing illegal examinations and procedures. In India, police detained 7 suspects, including 2 doctors at private hospitals in Delhi and Mumbai, who had allegedly performed illegal transplants. Turkish authorities raided 3 private medical facilities in Istanbul, arresting 9 people, including 2 surgeons, several nurses, and administrative staff who had facilitated the illegal procedures. Pakistani police made 6 arrests, primarily targeting logistics coordinators who had arranged travel and accommodation for donors and recipients. The wave of arrests generated intense media coverage across all affected regions. Egypt's state-run newspaper Al Jamhuriya published a front-page story on February 18, 2017, with the headline, "Criminal Network Exploiting Egypt's Poor, Dismantled by International Police Operation." The article quoted Egypt's health minister, Dr. Ahmed Hassan, who stated, "These criminals preyed upon our most vulnerable citizens, offering false promises while inflicting permanent damage to their health and well-being. The arrests represent not just a law enforcement success, but a moral imperative. We must protect our people from those who would literally harvest their bodies for profit." Similar sentiments were echoed in Indian media, with The Times of India publishing an editorial on February 20th, 2017, titled "The Darkness of the Dark Web," which called for stronger cybercrime laws and better international cooperation to combat digital age criminal networks. As the arrested individuals began appearing in court systems across multiple countries, the complexity of prosecuting international cybercrime became evident. In Ukraine, Volkov's defense attorneys immediately challenged the evidence, arguing that much of it had been obtained through illegal hacking by the researcher Netrunner. The data that forms the foundation of the prosecution's case was stolen through what amounts to a cyber attack, argued Volkov's attorney, Mikhail Sokolov, during a preliminary hearing on March 8, 2017. "Regardless of the platform's activities, which my client denies involvement in, the evidence is fruit from a poisoned tree and should be inadmissible." This legal argument created genuine complications for prosecutors, who had to carefully navigate the question of how the evidence had been obtained while building their case. The prosecution in Volkov's case, led by Ukrainian Deputy Prosecutor General Yuri Lutsenko, countered that the evidence provided by Netrunner had been properly transmitted through journalistic intermediaries to law enforcement, and that subsequent investigation had independently verified many of the database's contents. "We are not relying solely on the leaked data," Lutsenko explained in court filings submitted on March 22, 2017. "The database provided investigative leads that allowed us to conduct lawful surveillance, obtain search warrants, and gather independent evidence. The defendant's own computers, seized during a lawful search, contained information that corroborates and expands upon what was in the leaked database. The defense's argument is a smokescreen designed to protect a predator who orchestrated the exploitation of hundreds of vulnerable people." While the legal proceedings crawled forward in Ukraine, prosecutions in other countries faced their own challenges. In Egypt, several of the arrested recruiters claimed they were merely connecting people to online platforms and had no knowledge that any illegal activity was taking place. "I thought it was a legitimate medical service," testified Mohammed Nabil, the Cairo recruiter, during his initial court appearance on March 15, 2017. "The men I spoke with were adults making their own decisions. I didn't force anyone. I didn't know the details of what happened after they accessed the website." This defense strategy, arguing ignorance of the broader criminal network, was echoed by several other defendants and presented prosecutors with the challenge of proving that these low-level operatives understood and intentionally participated in illegal activities. In India, the prosecution of the medical professionals accused of performing illegal transplants became entangled in questions about medical autonomy and regulatory oversight. Dr. Rajesh Kumar, one of the Delhi physicians arrested, maintained that he had performed transplants on patients who assured him all legal requirements had been met. "I verified that all paperwork appeared to be in order," Dr. Kumar testified during his bail hearing on March 29, 2017. "The patients presented documentation showing family relationships between donors and recipients, which is required under Indian law. If those documents were fraudulent, I was deceived along with everyone else." The prosecution argued that Dr. Kumar had been willfully blind to obvious red flags, including the suspicious circumstances under which donors and recipients appeared at his clinic, often arriving within days of each other from different parts of the country with no prior medical relationship with the facility. As the legal proceedings unfolded, investigators continued to analyze the Bioharvest database and uncover additional layers of the network's operations. A particularly disturbing discovery, revealed in an Interpol intelligence report dated April 14, 2017, was the existence of a premium service tier within the platform that offered organs from specially selected donors. According to the database records, this service charged significantly higher prices, up to $300,000 for a kidney, and promised organs from young, healthy donors who had been subjected to extensive medical screening. The records suggested that some donors in this premium category had been specifically recruited for their ideal medical profiles, raising the question of whether some individuals had been specifically targeted rather than simply responding to general recruitment efforts. The investigation also uncovered evidence of the network's expansion plans. Documents seized from Volkov's computers, analyzed by Ukrainian forensic investigators, and detailed in a report submitted to the court on April 28, 2017, showed that Bioharvest's operators had been planning to expand their services to include liver segments and even corneas. Internal communications discussed the technical challenges of preserving and transporting these organs, the need to recruit surgical specialists, and potential profit margins. The liver market represents a significant growth opportunity. One message from Volkov's account read, "Current medical advances allow for living donation of liver segments with acceptably low risk profiles. Target donor pool, identical demographics to current kidney operations. Estimated premium for liver, 2.5x to 3x kidney pricing based on scarcity and recipient desperation factors." The human cost of the network's operations became painfully clear through testimony from victims who came forward during the investigations. In May 2017, as multiple trials were beginning or in preliminary stages, several international human rights organizations compiled reports documenting the experiences of people who had sold organs through the Darknet networks. Human Rights Watch published a comprehensive report on May 17, 2017, titled "Exploited and Discarded: The Global Trade in Human Organs Through Digital Black Markets," which included interviews with 43 individuals from Egypt, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh who had sold kidneys through various Darknet platforms, including Bioharvest. The report painted a devastating picture of systematic exploitation. Almost all interviewed donors reported receiving significantly less compensation than initially promised, with actual payments ranging from 20% to 60% of agreed amounts. Many described being coerced into accepting lower payments after surgeries had already been performed, with threats that they would receive nothing if they refused. Post-operative care was universally described as inadequate, with donors typically receiving only basic pain medication and cursory follow-up instructions before being sent home. Complications were common. 31 of the 43 interviewed donors reported serious health issues following surgery, including infections, chronic pain, kidney function problems in their remaining kidney, and psychological trauma. The report included the testimony of Aisha Muhammad, a 31-year-old Pakistani woman who had sold her kidney through a Darknet platform in late 2015. Muhammad's story was particularly tragic because she had made the decision to sell her organ specifically to raise money for her 7-year-old daughter's education, hoping to break the cycle of poverty that had trapped her family for generations. "I thought I was doing something noble, sacrificing part of myself so my daughter could have opportunities I never had," Muhammad told Human Rights Watch investigators. "They promised me $7,000, enough to pay for years of schooling." The surgery was in Karachi, in a clinic that looked professional, but afterward, everything fell apart. "I developed a severe infection and had to go to a public hospital for treatment. The people who arranged everything disappeared. I received only $2,500. Now I'm in worse condition than before. I can't do the physical labor I once did. I'm in constant pain, and the money is already gone paying my medical bills. My daughter is still in the same underfunded school. I sacrificed my health for nothing." The Human Rights Watch report made several policy recommendations, including calls for strengthening international cooperation on cybercrime enforcement, improving donor protection in countries with legal organ donation systems, addressing the economic desperation that drives people to sell organs, and developing better systems for tracking and preventing illegal transplant tourism. Dr. Margaret Chen, the lead researcher on the report, stated in its introduction, "The Darknet organ trade represents a perfect storm of technological capability, enabling criminal exploitation of systemic inequality. The buyers are wealthy patients from countries where organ donation systems are insufficient to meet demand. The sellers are desperate people from countries where economic opportunity is limited and social safety nets are weak or non-existent. The criminals who connect them operate in a digital space that transcends borders and evades traditional law enforcement. Dismantling these networks requires not just arrests and prosecutions, but fundamental changes to the global systems that create the conditions allowing them to flourish. By mid-2017, the prosecutions were progressing through various legal systems, though at vastly different paces. In Ukraine, Dmitry Volkov's trial began on June 12, 2017, in the Kiev District Court. The proceedings attracted significant media attention, with Ukrainian and international journalists filling the courtroom. The prosecution presented a comprehensive case built around the leaked Bioharvest database, evidence seized from Volkov's computers and apartment, financial records showing cryptocurrency transactions totaling millions of dollars, and testimony from victims and arrested co-conspirators who had agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. One of the prosecution's key witnesses was Sergei Petrov, a 32-year-old Russian national who had served as Bioharvest's primary medical coordinator from 2014 to 2016. Petrov, who had been arrested in Belarus and extradited to Ukraine in exchange for a plea agreement, provided detailed testimony about the platform's operations during 3 days on the stand in late June 2017. According to court transcripts, Petrov described how he had been recruited by Volkov after they met in an online forum for Darknet market operators. Dmitry explained that there was huge demand for organs from wealthy patients in the Gulf states and Asia, and an equally huge supply of potential donors in poor countries, Petrov testified. He said we could create a platform that would efficiently match supply with demand, and that we'd be providing a service, connecting willing parties who both benefited. At the beginning, I actually believed that narrative. But over time, as I communicated with donors and saw what happened to them, I realized we were running an exploitation machine. People were being lured with false promises, subjected to dangerous procedures, and then abandoned with a fraction of what they'd been promised. But by then, I was in too deep, and the money was too good. Petrov's testimony provided crucial insights into the network's financial structures. He explained how payments were processed through multiple cryptocurrency exchanges to obscure their origins, how the platform used tumbling services that mixed transactions from multiple sources to break the chain of traceability, and how funds were ultimately converted back to conventional currency through a network of money exchangers operating in countries with minimal financial oversight. He also described Volkov's leadership style, portraying him as technically brilliant but completely amoral when it came to the human consequences of the operation. Dmitry viewed everything through spreadsheets and profit margins, Petrov stated. When I raised concerns about donors suffering complications, he would calculate the cost of potential legal exposure versus the cost of providing better medical care, and he always chose whichever option was cheaper. To him, these weren't people, they were just supply units in an inventory management system. The defense attempted to undermine Petrov's credibility, arguing that he was testifying in exchange for leniency and therefore had incentive to exaggerate Volkov's role and culpability. However, the prosecution bolstered Petrov's testimony with extensive documentary evidence, including thousands of messages between Volkov and various network associates, financial records showing his control over the platform's cryptocurrency wallets, and technical evidence demonstrating that Volkov's computers had been used to administer the Bioharvest marketplace. The prosecution also introduced testimony from several victims who had traveled to Ukraine at significant personal expense to confront the man who had orchestrated the system that harmed them. One such witness was Youssef Ibrahim, the Egyptian man whose story had been featured in The Guardian's original investigation. Ibrahim, who was still suffering health complications from his kidney removal nearly 2 years earlier, addressed Volkov directly during his testimony on July 11, 2017. "You took my health, my ability to work, and the money I needed to save my father's life," Ibrahim said, his voice breaking with emotion, according to media reports from the courtroom. "You made promises you never intended to keep, and when things went wrong, you simply disappeared. I want you to understand that I am not just a transaction in your database. I am a human being whose life you destroyed. How many others are there like me? How many people are suffering because you decided their bodies were worth less than your profits?" Volkov, according to journalists present in the courtroom, showed no visible emotion during Ibrahim's testimony, sitting impassively beside his attorneys. As Volkov's trial proceeded in Ukraine, Prosecutions in other countries reached various conclusions. In Egypt, the trial of the 11 arrested individuals began on July 24, 2017, in a Cairo criminal court. The prosecution presented evidence that the defendants had been part of a coordinated network that recruited over 100 Egyptian donors for the Bioharvest platform between 2014 and 2017. The case relied heavily on testimony from victims who had been recruited by the defendants, as well as financial records showing payments the recruiters had received for their services. Mohammed Nabil and 4 other recruiters initially maintained their innocence, but eventually entered guilty pleas in exchange for reduced sentences after prosecutors demonstrated the strength of their evidence. On September 8, 2017, the Cairo court issued its verdicts in the case. 3 recruiters, including Nabil, were sentenced to 6 years in prison for human trafficking and participating in organized criminal activity. 2 others received 4-year sentences based on their lesser roles in the network. 4 medical professionals who had conducted unauthorized medical examinations of potential donors were convicted of violating medical ethics regulations and received suspended sentences with permanent license revocations. 2 defendants were acquitted due to insufficient evidence of their knowing participation in illegal activities. Egyptian media covered the sentencing extensively, with Al Haram's headline reading, "Justice for Victims of Organ Trafficking Network as Cairo Court Delivers Prison Sentences." The Egyptian verdicts established important legal precedents, particularly regarding the liability of intermediaries in Darknet criminal networks. Judge Hassan al-Shinawi, who presided over the case, addressed this issue directly in his written decision. The defendants argue that they merely provided information and connections, that the actual transactions occurred elsewhere beyond their control and knowledge. This court rejects such arguments. The evidence demonstrates that the defendants were aware of the nature of the network they were serving. They targeted vulnerable individuals specifically because of their economic desperation. They provided detailed instructions for accessing illegal platforms. They received payments contingent on successfully directing people to these platforms. Such actions constitute knowing participation in human trafficking, regardless of whether the defendants personally performed medical procedures or directly received payment from organ recipients. In India, the prosecution of the medical professionals moved more slowly, hampered by legal challenges regarding evidence admissibility and questions about medical regulatory jurisdiction. Dr. Rajesh Kumar and his co-defendant Dr. Anita Sharma challenged the charges against them, arguing that they had been conducting legitimate medical procedures based on documentation they had been provided and that any fraud in that documentation was not their responsibility. The case became entangled in broader debates within India's medical community about the adequacy of oversight systems for transplant procedures and whether individual physicians could reasonably be expected to verify the authenticity of all documentation presented by patients. The trial, which began in Delhi's Patiala House Court on August 14, 2017, featured extensive technical testimony about India's transplant regulations and the procedures physicians should follow to ensure compliance. The prosecution argued that Dr. Kumar and Dr. Sharma had ignored obvious red flags that should have alerted them to suspicious circumstances. The defendants claim they were deceived, but let us examine the facts, argued prosecutor Ramesh Sinha in his opening statement. In multiple cases, unrelated donors and recipients appeared at their clinics within days of each other, claiming to have arranged family transplants through online consultations. They presented authorization documents from states and jurisdictions where neither party had ever resided. They paid extraordinary fees in cash with no questions asked. They avoided all follow-up appointments and could not be contacted after procedures. These are not the pattern of legitimate medical practice. These are the hallmarks of deliberate complicity in illegal operations. The Delhi court hearings stretched through September and into October 2017, with medical experts, regulatory officials, and former patients providing testimony about standards of care and the responsibilities of transplant surgeons. On October 26, 2017, the court delivered its verdict. Dr. Kumar was found guilty of performing illegal transplants and violating medical ethics regulations, receiving a 4-year prison sentence and permanent revocation of his medical license. Dr. Sharma was convicted on lesser charges and received a 2-year suspended sentence with a 5-year license suspension. In his judgment, Judge Arun Mishra wrote, "Medical professionals occupy positions of extraordinary trust and authority. With that authority comes responsibility to ensure their skills are not exploited for criminal purposes. Willful blindness to obvious illegality does not constitute a defense. Back in Ukraine, Dmitry Volkov's trial concluded on November 17, 2017. After 5 months of proceedings, the prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence of Volkov's central role in creating and operating Bioharvest, including his technical administration of the platform, his control over financial operations, and his direct involvement in strategic decisions that prioritized profit over human welfare. The defense had argued that Volkov was merely providing a neutral technology platform and that any illegal activity was the responsibility of users who chose to misuse his service, an argument the prosecution systematically dismantled by demonstrating Volkov's active participation in every aspect of the organ trafficking operation. On November 17, 2017, Judge Olga Kuzmenko delivered the verdict. Volkov was found guilty on all charges: organized crime leadership, human trafficking, money laundering, and operating illegal medical services. The court sentenced him to 14 years in a maximum security prison with asset forfeiture of all proceeds from the criminal enterprise, estimated at over $3 million in seized cryptocurrency and physical assets. Judge Kuzmenko's sentencing statement was unequivocal. The defendant created and operated a system that systematically exploited the desperation of the poor and vulnerable, treating human beings as commodities to be harvested and sold. The suffering caused by this network is immeasurable. Hundreds of people left with permanent health damage, families destroyed by false promises, and lives fundamentally diminished by the defendant's greed. This court must send an unmistakable message that such exploitation will be met with the full force of justice. The convictions across multiple jurisdictions represented significant victories for law enforcement and prosecutors who had worked to dismantle the Darknet organ trafficking networks. Yet, as investigators and advocacy groups acknowledged, the arrests and trials addressed only one network among many. By late 2017, cybercrime analysts had identified at least 20 other Darknet marketplaces continuing to facilitate organ trafficking, many with enhanced security measures designed to avoid the vulnerabilities that had led to Bioharvest's exposure. The fundamental conditions that enabled the trade, vast global inequality, insufficient legal organ donation systems, technological anonymity, and cryptocurrency's opacity, remained largely unchanged. In a joint press conference held on December 4, 2017, representatives from Interpol, the FBI, Europol, and law enforcement agencies from India, Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan announced the results of their coordinated operation. The agencies reported a total of 47 arrests across 8 countries, the seizure of over $5 million in assets, the identification of more than 400 victims, and the disruption of one of the world's largest organ trafficking networks. Interpol Secretary General Jürgen Stock stated, "This operation demonstrates what international cooperation can achieve against sophisticated transnational criminal networks. But we must be realistic. We have won an important battle, not the war. The fight against Darknet-enabled organ trafficking requires sustained effort, continued cooperation, and fundamental changes to address the inequalities that criminals exploit." For the victims, the legal victories brought limited consolation. Most would live with permanent health consequences from their decisions to sell organs. The compensation they had been promised would never materialize. No amount of justice could restore what had been taken from them. Ahmed Hassan, the young Egyptian man whose desperate search in that Cairo internet cafe in March 2016 began his journey into this dark world, perhaps expressed it most simply in an interview with Al Jazeera conducted in December 2017. "They went to prison? Good. But I still have only one kidney. I still cannot work as I once did. My mother is still sick, and I am still poor. The system that led me to that website, that system is still there, waiting for the next desperate person. Until we fix that, these criminals will just be replaced by others." The Darknet organ trade cases of 2016 to 2017 exposed the terrifying efficiency with which modern technology could be weaponized to exploit human vulnerability on a global scale, revealing that, in the digital shadows, human bodies had become just another commodity, listed, priced, and traded with the cold precision of an algorithm that measured profit in organs and calculated human suffering as merely an acceptable business cost.